Aloha kako, and welcome to Finding Our Futures. I'm John Sweeney in the Hawaii Research Center for Future Studies. And today's show is going to be all about the Philippines. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be joined by Shermon O. Cruz. Shermon is currently the director of the Center for Engaged Foresight, a startup and futures innovation hub established in 2011 to advance and intensify the aptitude of persons, communities, and societies on futures thinking, strategies, and methodologies in leadership and decision-making, public policy, and governance in the Philippines and Southeast Asia. And obviously, we're going to hear a lot about today the need for that sort of foresight and work to be done. Shermon is also a lecturer at Northwestern University in the College of Arts and Sciences in the Philippines, and he's taught in a number of other programs and focuses much of his research on the interface between policy and futures foresight. So Shermon, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, good morning, John. Thank you very much for inviting me, at least to share some of my thoughts about things that are going on in the Philippines right now, especially concerning issues pertaining to high disaster regions and their futures.
That's right. So the title for today's show is Learning from Experience, Resilience, and Grassroots Innovation in High Disaster Risk Regions. And obviously, what is on everyone's mind is the aftermath of Haiyan, finding ways to rebuild. But I like that already we're starting to use these terms, and this was your idea of thinking about resilience and grassroots innovation. So first and foremost, could you give us just a status update, what's happening on the ground, and sort of from your perspective, how the government is responding to obviously an immense crisis?
Yeah, there's been many updates going on, and that there are a lot of columnists, professors, and government officials who have been interacting continuously to improve the situation in Tacloban, especially in the Visayas region. As of now, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware of, is that things has been going better as far as the relief operations are concerned, and the government has expanded its national disaster plan to respond to what happened in that area. And they have incorporated and made initial plans on pertaining to the rehabilitation in terms of long-term rehabilitation in the Visayas.
Yeah. Now, one of the key questions is obviously how the government not only picks up the pieces and does the rebuilding, but how local people on the ground find ways to move on from what is obviously, hopefully a once-in-a-generation crisis and tragedy. So aside from the governance response, how have you seen local communities finding ways of, again, making the best of obviously a horrible tragedy? Yeah.
First is that, of course, based on their narratives and interviews with the victims, I learned that the trauma is so deep, the fact that the impact was so personal. They have experienced so many deaths, including disruptions in their way of life, like, for example, their businesses, their properties, including in their identities. They have lost their identification documents, their records, among other stuff that they need to move forward. But of course, psychologically speaking, as far as responding or perhaps transcending the traumas are concerned, what happened recently was that Manny Pacquiao fought in the World Boxing just last Sunday. Right. And that gave the win by Pacquiao, gave them some sort of a tremendous shift as far as the emotions are concerned, the psyche of these people affected, and they considered the win of Pacquiao as some sort of symbolizes their hope. And the resilience the Filipinos, the local people have as far as resilience is concerned, and they now have this, they're trying to imagine ways by which they could come back after that knockdown they have experienced 2 weeks ago. So Pacquiao was, I think, was a necessary first step to at least address their traumas and give them hope. I think the role of Pacquiao was so huge and so tremendous. And I just learned this morning that Pacquiao is visiting the place this afternoon. And they said that he will be sleeping with them And if possible, he will sleep with them in the tent. And I think Pacquiao will go over the place like for a month. Yeah, yeah, just to give these people like hope and perhaps smile at least in the midst of this tragedy.
Right. Yeah, that's a really powerful story, and obviously you can see how Pacquiao has ascended to become a national hero. But even beyond that, right? I mean, there's a myth there. It really is about this broader identity, and obviously the Filipino diaspora as well. And so it seems that we're jumping right into one of the tenets of CLA. So causal layered analysis is a futures methodology and framework that you utilize quite a bit in your work, and obviously is critical to developing and working through that trauma, of finding ways of creating new identities, but also of looking into the past. And so certainly that metaphor of the boxer returning, right, of being knocked out and coming back and winning, is a great means to give people hope and move forward. What are some of the other sort of myths, metaphors, some of maybe the identity narratives that you see people looking at as a means of imagining maybe alternative futures based on what obviously has been a tremendous crisis?
Yeah, for one is that first, I think the Filipino has really has a strong heart, and that with that they have been into some. They have experienced like poverty in quite a couple of years now, and the poverty perhaps have served them in a way that made them more resilient, as far as responding and engaging and. Not really in terms of preparing, for disaster, but responding to some after impact scenarios, like worst case scenarios, if I may. About the other myths, I don't know. That still I have to find out. What are their myths as far as these people are concerned? I don't know what their mythical stories are about. But as far as I'm concerned, in this part of the country, is that one of our myths is what we call the. Now I forgot the myth of Lamang. We have this myth. Lamang is a warrior. And that myth has served the Ilocano community, for quite a number of thousands of years now. And Lamang is a warrior. They have a spirit of. They know how to respond to challenges. As far as Filipinos are concerned, while there are a lot of challenges, they know how to respond to it, and they find ways in which they could actually transcend themselves. From disasters, personal, social, institutional, whatever that is.
Right. Yeah, that's that cultivating resiliency. And like you're saying, obviously people have had to manage and deal with endemic and systemic poverty and find ways of surviving. And this obviously is at a whole nother scale. But that internal sense of overcoming and of picking up the pieces is obviously already present. So how has your work been involved in imagining alternatives? And obviously, I know you've done a lot of work in finding ways to combat that systemic poverty and to try to imagine different sorts of models, social models, economic models. So where do you see futures fitting into this rebuilding effort, and then hopefully trying to move forward with, again, finding adaptive and creative ways of coming out of this crisis, even stronger than before?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is first we have to ask the right questions. What happened in the Visayas in the Philippines is just like it was an outlier event. No one expected that to happen, and the preparations was not enough to respond to it. In fact, before the typhoon occurred, what the government had in mind was like the target was zero casualty. Zero casualty in the sense that, okay, we have this disaster risk preparedness, disaster management manuals, and we need to implement it. But after that, what happened was like, the first responders became the victims themselves. So as the first responders became the victims themselves, now the local government unit concerned, including the national government, didn't know what to do. So perhaps because they looked at typhoon in a business as usual scenario, wherein, okay, it occurs to this part of the world every year, like we're hit with 25 typhoons a year. And perhaps even though the government was able to inform those communities that were affected, like 3 or 4 days, that this will be a super typhoon coming up. And of course, everything was in place, everything was prepared, and then the outlier event happened. So I think what the government need to do, and all the people who would like to take part in this endeavor and to make the country more resilient in these kinds of disasters, is that perhaps the first thing we need to do is that we have to ask more questions. We have to ask new questions, and we have to ask new questions in order for us to generate new insights. In the process of conversing with the people affected, with the government. I think this is a multi-sectoral effort. We need to participate at the local and global levels. And just asking the right questions, I think, is the first thing that we need to do. There are a lot of tensions that are going on at the moment after disasters. Tensions in terms of how the government or the communities themselves could respond to further marginalization, to further poverty, as far as health is concerned. And the issue of migration is a complex issue. I think that we have to look in as far as the future is concerned. What the other local governments, provinces are doing right now in trying to provide, as far as the people affected are concerned, is that they're offering them some sort of, okay, you can migrate to our provinces at the moment, and then we can give you shelter, we can give you food, we can give you temporary jobs just to alleviate the suffering of these people. That is an issue. Another one is, of course, internal migration. That issue is, in the Philippines, particularly in the Philippines, is a new issue. And another one is, of course, storm surges. That was the first time that such magnitude of storm surge occurred in the country. What we were expecting then was like a storm surge of around 3 to 5 minutes inward to urban areas. But this was a disaster. It's like what records showed that as far as the weather stations were concerned, and the local scientists, is that reports indicate that the storm surge was like around 20 feet, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
So is this a storm surge or just tsunami? Everyone is confused.
Yeah.
Even the president himself was saying, while he had assumptions that was a storm surge, but the president has told us now that new researches on storm surges should happen. Yeah. As far as the future is concerned, of course, the event actually exposed the capacity of the government and the communities to respond to new types of disasters. The country was exposed that, we, as far as capability is concerned, we are not really capable of responding to those disasters. Not just during the disaster, including the impact, the after-impact events. It was like chaos. There were a lot of looting that occurred in that area. The worst-case scenario that you could imagine was all there.
Right.
It was like unimaginable. So we learned that the most marginalized and the poor and those living in poverty are the most exposed to these kinds of disaster. And as far as the future is concerned, there are certain things that the Philippines and us should really think about and perhaps deconstruct, and perhaps apply CLA or alternative futures to actually look into things that are important. Like, one, we really need to address poverty in the Philippines, because poverty amplifies the impact of disasters. One is we need to capacitate our communities. Capacity building is very important, but the question is, what capacities do we need to build on? What are the capacities that we need to really look into, and what are the capacities we need, to actually address the situation or mitigate the impact of outlier disaster events in the future? And third is that would be resilience. You know, people and communities has to be resilient, but perhaps our perspective of resilience has to be redefined or reassessed. You know, what is resilience in this kinds of situation? While we may say that we are resilient, using perhaps a past-oriented concept of resilience, perhaps the concept of resilience has to be explored further, and that has to be redefined. Do we need a new concept of resilience? What is resilience as far as these global events are concerned? Another one is that we have to strengthen citizen engagement in the local areas. Yeah, citizen engagement in what way? Do we need technologies to come in? What about their access to digital technologies? How can we improve engagement as far as preparation of disasters are concerned? We need to adopt cooperative strategies. You know, of course, technology can enhance our interfaces, public interfaces, as far as preparations are concerned, or making people more resilient. But, you know, there is a concept or a myth, Filipino myth that we call bayanihan, or what we call collective heroism. I think we need to adopt that as a concept, and perhaps it can help us develop new strategies and technologies that consider this myth of bayanihan.
Yeah,
you know,
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that, like you're saying, the myth and finding a way to link the future with the past is going to be critical for engaging ways to move forward. Okay, so we have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more from Shermon O, Cruz, director of the Center for Engaged Foresight, talking about post-Haiyan futures, learning from experience, and resiliency in the Philippines. This is Finding Our Futures on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll be back in just a bit. Stay tuned.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech. ThinkTech is a 501c3 Hawaii nonprofit corporation. We began ThinkTech in the year 2000. At ThinkTech, we work to raise public awareness about tech, energy diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. We do 20 live stream talk shows every business day, and we do a weekly TV show on OC16. We pay the bills with donations from our supporters. Won't you help us by making a donation? All you need to do is go to our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and click there on the Donate button. We hope that you like what we do and that you will support us and help us continue to do it. Thanks so much for watching and for helping. I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech. Mahalo.
Aloha and welcome back to Finding Our Futures. I'm John A. Sweeney in the Hawaii Research Center for Future Studies. And it's definitely a pleasure, and certainly I'm learning a lot about the Philippines from Shermon O, Cruz, who's the director of the Center for Engaged Foresight. And Sherman, when we left off, you were talking about how we actually need to redefine or look to new concepts of resiliency, because one of the critical aspects of futures thinking is that the future obviously is something that we might not be able to reconcile or predict or make sense of based on our experiences of the past. And so obviously there is a desire, or even sort of a, almost an animalistic tendency in post-crises moments to focus hypersensitively on the present, right, and to invest ourselves in the moment now. But one of the things that these if there's any opportunity here, like you were saying, it's to look forward, right, to find ways of building new models and how to do that in the futures. So I'd love to hear more, and I'd like to have you speak a little bit more about your notions and the engaged community identity, and also new models of resiliency that could be used, hopefully, again, to sort of buttress these types of events and then hopefully move us to a better future.
Yeah, there are a number of innovations that has been going on in the Philippines, especially in those parts of the country wherein they have been really resilient as far as typhoons and natural disasters are concerned. Like, for example, in the province of Ilocos Norte, in my place, for a number of decades, like for I might say like for hundreds of years, we have been visited by hundreds of typhoons. And as far as recent studies concerned, conducted by the Worldwide Fund, tried to assess and evaluate the resilience of these cities, our city was considered by WWF as a refuge area. So why is that? Why is our city a refuge area? and the other cities not. Like, for example, Metro Manila or Baguio or Cebu City. These are cities that were considered by a lot of research as risk areas, wherein the cities has a high risk of casualties, among other things, when disaster comes. One is that, of course, population density. Population density is a very important issue. That is a long-term issue. In our city is that like we're one of the cities in the Philippines that has been considered by the National Statistics Coordinating Board as one that's having the lowest in terms of birth rate. That's one. And I'm just curious now, why is that? Why is our city like compared to other cities that we have one of the lowest in terms of population density? Another one is that I've been inspired by a research conducted recently, like last year. They were saying that the Philippines is supposed not to have any mining industry. Mining is a very critical issue in the Philippines right now. They've been saying that you cannot have mining in an island ecosystem. Wherein you are surrounded by seas and mountains, among other stuff. You have to preserve, you have to maintain these things because nature is resilience. It could actually protect, and prevent disasters, from occurring. Now, in this part of the country, there hasn't been any large-scale mining going on. There has been mining in the past, but that was stopped during the Marcos period. But as of now, no mining activities has been occurring in the last 30 years. So that could be one of the reasons why this particular province or city has been resilient. Another one is, of course, the economy. Economy is very essential as far as resilience is concerned when you're talking about purchasing capacity, being able to prepare in times of disaster. Of course, we want to be like some sort of preppers, but you need to have some fund to actually prepare for disasters and respond to after impact. Now, in the Philippines, in this part of the country, one is that, the OFW remittances, like overseas foreign workers remittances, in this part of the province is one of the highest in the country. It's even higher than our provincial income. Records indicate that the overseas foreign remittance in the province of Ilocos Norte is around 4.6 billion pesos. That's a way higher than the provincial income. So the provincial income in 2006 was just around 1.6 billion, and the remittances was 4.6 billion. So imagine the purchasing power of households and families as far as building houses are concerned. The houses in this part of the country are they could actually respond to disaster. They could prevent the impact. And then they've been infrastructures, as far as infrastructure is concerned. Again, the people are quite vigilant as far as provincial governments are concerned. You want to make a province or state or a city resilient to these kinds of disasters. Government infrastructure projects does help a lot as far as building dikes. As far as excavating rivers are concerned, you need to have some funding for that. Provincial government or local governments need not have to rely on the support that the national government is giving us. And as far as this province is concerned, that has been the experience. This province has not been some sort of relying to external funding, but it had kept it sustained itself over the years. For 20 years. That's where the bayanihan comes in. That's where the adopting new cooperative strategies as far as preparing for good things and bad things at the same time. And looking at, for example, in other parts of the country, like Batanes, for example. Batanes is just near Taiwan. It's an island. And national government support in these areas is not quite as much as what has been given, to the regions where there's our population, the population density is high, where there are a large number of votes, among other stuff. But this people has been resilient in terms that they've been building houses that could actually withstand these disasters. Now, the national government is trying to look at this as models, trying to build houses that could actually withstand even super typhoons such as Haiyan. So, and another one is that, of course, we've said in the past that necessity is the mother of all invention. I've been able to read some articles, emergent issues that people in this area is affected, creating new innovations. These are innovations that are cheap, a dirt-based, if I may say, innovation prototypes, providing light electricity, access to telecommunication in a very smart way. There are a lot of innovations, I think, going on, but the national government has to perhaps apply new types of research methodology and try to look on innovations models that are been going on over the country. I think I'm quite positive that there are a lot of things that the Filipinos could offer as far as innovation is concerned.
That's good to hear. And obviously, the critical questions and what Futures tries to do is to imagine those possibilities without the crises, such that when these crises come, we can soften the blow and hopefully not have the kind of devastation that occurred. So you mentioned that there tends to be this sort of like local sort of national divide. So how do you see the local governments interfacing with national government, the national government at that level? And sort of, do you see Futures as a potential bridge there? Or are there other organizations? And obviously, being that you work a lot with the university and seeing students, do you see the next generation attentive to these sorts of issues as well? And how does that fall out as far as sort of demographic perspectives within the Philippines on these sorts of questions?
Yeah, as far as the national government, the local government is concerned, is that there's been tensions going on. Actually, as of now, there are a lot of political bickerings that has been happening, over the past few weeks, between the local government officials and the national government. And I think even the national government does not know how to actually, this is just my opinion, to respond, in those situations in a political level. There are certain things that has been going on, especially so that the area that has been affected is we all know, it's a public knowledge that there has been a distancing gap, or a political, how do I say it, political bickering that's been going on for a number of years between the Marcoses and the Aquinos. And incidentally, the area that was affected was a bailiwick of the Marcoses. That is a Marcos bailiwick. And in fact, the mayor is the cousin of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And when the national government responded into that area, it's like, of course, it's all over the news that there's been so much, I don't know, how do I say it? I don't know how to actually put this into words, but basically, there has been political threats going on, not necessarily killing each other, but of course, far as the political future of this politicians are concerned. And another one is that the national government is responding to the local government officials whom they say that have been victims themselves by threatening them to file cases of corruption, file I don't know, whatever cases they would file to these people. But I don't think that this kinds of narratives or discourses, policy statements will help as far as this political issues are concerned. And as far as institutions like the private sector, the higher education institutions, the students. In fact, at this very moment, they are now very engaged in the relief effort. At different levels. like food, communications, sending them poetries and cards, messages of hopes, and raising funds. There has been a lot of new ways, innovation that's been going on from grassroots to urban areas to help the people affected. In fact, my youngest son, a first grader, themselves are helping in the effort by selling some stuff to raise some funds, just to and then donates a cash to this affected, to this areas affected. So there's been a lot of going on, and I hope that we'll be able to document some of those and perhaps integrate it in how the government would respond to disasters and alleviate people, in high disaster regions.
Right.
High risk disaster regions.
Right. That's good to hear. Okay, so we're hearing from Shermon O. Cruz, who's currently the director of the Center for Engaged Foresight, talking about post-Haiyan futures in the Philippines, grassroots, resiliency, and innovation. You're watching Finding Our Futures. I'm John Sweeney at the Hawaii Research Center for Future Studies. We're going to take a short break, so stay with us. We'll be back in a bit.
Aloha. I'm Nicole Horry for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Aloha kako, and welcome back to Finding Our Futures. I'm John Sweeney at the Hawaii Research Center for Future Studies. Today we're talking to Shermon O. Cruz, who's the director of the Center for Engaged Foresight in the Philippines. And Shermon has been talking to us about learning from experience, resilience, and grassroots innovations in high disaster risk regions, post-Haiyan futures in the Philippines. So Shermon, you were just telling us how the next generation, and in a very personal way, right, the work your son is doing and the university students, and how this is really driving a national sort of response. But I also want to talk about the international response as well. Obviously, there have been geopolitical tensions in the region. China's been flexing their muscle, obviously, with questions about oil and resources within South China Sea, and there's been some tension there. And there was this odd story about how actually at one point IKEA, this sort of international furniture producer, had given more aid to the Philippines than China. And China, obviously, looking to develop further clout in the region, needs to step up to the plate and do the sorts of necessary work within the region if, in fact, it wants to take on that role. So can you talk a little bit about how you see international aid coming in? What is the situation? And then maybe some of the geopolitics in and around the region, specifically related to China.
Yeah, first, with that event, we have seen how compassion could occur on a global scale. That's the first time in the world. Like what happened, like we had the super typhoon that occurred in the Philippines, and then after that is that we have seen a global scale of compassion, some sort of a global compassion, if I may. And now, responding to the China issue is that I think China did not know what to do. Perhaps they were quite perplexed or confused on how to respond to that in those kinds of situations. Simply because they have been like the Philippines and China has been like battering each other and at a global scale as far as geopolitics is concerned. The fact that the Philippines just filed a case against China as far as their claim is concerned in the International Court of Justice, I believe. Yeah, in some sense, China is like still trying to learn the tricks and trade of soft power as far as international politics is concerned. And they haven't realized that as far as soft power in Asia, we were talking about soft power in Asia, as far as I'm concerned, and I think that the Philippines is like it's where soft power occurs as far as this two geopolitics concerned. Now, China has to realize that if they want to look good as far as in Asia, they really have to be better as far as how they engage in the Philippines, considering the fact that, of course, the U.S. is like, and Japan is with the rehabilitation, the relief they've been doing. And of course, we know that there are other issues, that informs the response of the U.S. and China and Japan. Is that it's like China is still trying to learn. I don't know. This is just a wild guess, perhaps. This is just my opinion. Still trying to learn as far as soft power in Asia is concerned. There has been a lot of research conducted that is Asia prepared for China leadership, and they're saying that China is becoming emerging as superpower, but Asia is not yet prepared. Asia has some resistance, or perhaps some resistance. They do not. I don't know, how do I say it. They could not imagine a way wherein are we comfortable if China will lead Asia? The fact that China is China, and Or another question is it because of the Aquino administration that they are responding? They're responding in that way. There are local issues, perhaps national politics is or the prerogative or the priority or the policy of the local administration as far as this practice is concerned is impacting China, that China has to act like this. And they're saying that perhaps this is our way of showing the Asia and the world that a protest or something like that. But I would like to tell you this, John, in this part of the country, we all know that the Marxists are the leaders in this part of the country. China has its own consular office here. And in this part of the country, it's like, China has been extending its help, in this part of the country. It has been open. Like, I don't know, there are a lot of exchanges going on in the northern part of the country. Perhaps, I don't know, is it because of the leadership? These are just wild guesses, but there are a lot of factors. But then again, China has responded, to the criticisms. Right. And they've increased the magnitude of their relief efforts. They've sent, I think, a ship hospital, something like that, that could actually provide, I think, thousands of beds. I'm not sure about the details of that medical hospital. And what I'm expecting is that China perhaps will increase, as their relief and rehabilitation engagement and effort in the Philippines.
Right, like you're saying, there really is this emerging power triangle where very clearly China, in trying to increase its prowess and increase the soft power, like you said, is learning on the job, right? Not wanting to follow a model that obviously other powers have utilized, but really trying to find a way to engage the region. Some people even said this may be an opportunity for unlikely places to step up. For example, India, obviously a place with endemic poverty and with its own internal issues, but in looking to become a greater player in the region, potentially also offering aid as well. So I wanted to then, utilize this sort of futures, present, extended present sort of way of thinking, and try to get you to think about what's next. So let's move 20 years out. Where do you see the Philippines going in this post-Haiyan future? Or really, what is then your preferred future if, in fact, the Philippines are able to pull things together as you see in the crisis and then sort of move in that direction? Where would you like the Philippines to head in the next 20 years?
One is that I think there are a lot of things that we have to put into context. Like, one is that what I expect is that there will be increasing incidents of these kinds of disasters in the future. The country has to embrace complexity, and that, I think, we really have to put into heart all of these things in terms of leadership, systems, policies, among other structural things that we have to consider. Yeah, of course. My preferred feature is that the Philippines that is resilient, to disasters and to emerge as a model for other countries in the world as far as responding to disasters are concerned. Not just in terms of resilience after the impact, but resilience before, during, and after impact of disasters. I believe there again, I would like to repeat this, that, like, for example, in this part of the country, our city, we call the name of our city is actually, we called it the city of Lawag, and the meaning of Lawag is sunshine. And that perhaps, if I would put that in a national scale, I would like to have a Philippines wherein, like what Swahili Neatula said, is that fix the roof while the sun shines.
Right.
That is the myth that I would like to have as far as trying to look at the future, the Philippine future is concerned in responding to disaster. We need to fix the roof as the sun still shines. Perhaps we have to move beyond the concept that necessity or innovate. What was that?
Necessity is the mother of invention.
It's the mother of all invention.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we have to move beyond that. We have to fix the roof while the sun still shines. And the city of Lawag could offer, this province could offer a lot of models. The city of Lawag can offer itself as a model for local governments, and as far as cities, in high disaster regions in the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, Asia, and the world is concerned. We've done a lot of work. I could not put all of them into details, but we've done a lot of work as far as making our communities, our city, and our province resilient to natural disasters. But the question is how can we sustain that in the next 20 years? We have to create opportunity. We have to create structures. We want to create. We have to reconceptualize our views as far as disaster is concerned. That would be worldview, if we would like to put that into a CLA analysis. And yeah, that's it. I think in order for us to create a new headline, sunshine for the Philippines in the next 20 years, that would be fine.
Yeah, that's a very powerful metaphor, right? Fixing the roof while the sun is shining is a very apt futures appropriate way of considering these post-Haiyan futures. Okay, we're going to take our last break. We'll be back with more from Shermon O. Cruz, director of the Center for Engaged Foresight, coming to us from Lawag City in the Philippines. We're talking about learning from experience, resiliency, and grassroots innovation in high disaster risk areas. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a bit.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, broadcasting live from the Pioneer Plaza in downtown Honolulu. We raise public awareness about tech, energy, and globalism in Hawaii. Technology is critical to our state. A vibrant tech sector will give us new prospects in the global marketplace and will offer great careers and make our economy more resilient. Streaming live on Ustream and Spreaker, ThinkTech allows its hosts and guests invaluable opportunities to report important events and discuss important questions, and to be heard here in Hawaii and around the world. You can find links to our live streams on thinktechhawaii.com or on our mobile website, m.thinktechhawaii.com. And you can see our archive on YouTube. It's all just a click away. We want to do whatever we can to keep Hawaii relevant, connected, and thriving in the complexity of the 21st century. We hope you will help us in those efforts. Tune in today. This is ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidel. Mahalo.
Aloha kako. Welcome back to Finding Our Futures. Today we are joined by Shermon O. Cruz, director of the Center for Engaged Foresight. Shermon is also a lecturer in many things: humanities, international relations, social sciences at the College of Arts and Sciences at Northwestern University in the Philippines, and he's with us on the line live from Lawag City. So Shermon, I want to hear more about the Center for Engaged Foresight. It is a startup and futures innovation hub that you put together in 2011. So just talk a little bit about the center, and then maybe how you could see the center addressing some of the needs we've hit on in this obviously post-Haiyan crisis period.
Yeah, what we've been doing with this, as far as the Center for Engaged Foresight is concerned, is trying to build on the most basic stuff. I've been reading a lot as far as long-term thinking, studies and orientation is concerned, and from the IBM research that I got, and of course, including the research conducted by Google as far as long-term orientation is concerned, is that they found out that the Philippines is one of the lowest as far as long-term orientation is concerned, and compared to other countries all over the world. And with that in mind, what we've been trying to do is to facilitate programs and projects on futures literacy, and engaging non-government organization, private sector, educational institution, and national government agencies, including local government, exposing them to different research methods, future research methods, and how they could integrate these methods into public policy analysis and project development. So far, and that's what we've been doing. And other than that, of course, we've been doing some sort of research and been using Jim Dator's alternative features methods, and at the local level. And as far as the global level is concerned, we've been building some projects with the UNESCO Foresight, as far as features literacy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds great. And you have an upcoming article in the Journal of Future Studies, specifically using the Manoa School method. So could you talk a little bit about what that article was and how you carried out that research?
Yeah, it was about the future of the Panatag Shoal and the West Philippine Sea, ACA, aka Spratly Islands, unfolding in the next few years. So what I did is use Jim Dator's alternative features method, and I was surprised with the things that I found out using that method. And basically, there are 4 alternative features, as far as the Panatag Shoal is concerned. And one is, of course, I would like to start with the transformation scenario. That would be the Z scenario. The Z scenario is that when these countries, engage in programs and projects that encourages convergence and reconciliation, what I'm seeing here is that the emergence of new types of geopolitics in Asia. Because as far as I'm concerned, the impact of China is the most complex. The impact of China in Asia is the most complex, and that has to be looked into further. And as far as the Spratly Islands concerned, another one is the conservative discipline scenario, which I called, now I forgot, I need to refer to that again. But basically there are 4 alternative features. Right. There are a lot of information going on in my mind right now.
I know we've covered a lot of ground, and I've kept you going for quite a bit. So Sherman, the last thing I wanted to sort of hit on before we sign off is something that you closed with the last time. You obviously were talking about that trying to fix the roof right while the sun is shining, and that the importance of that metaphor. And then earlier on, we had talked about sort of the Pacquiao victory. So we only have a couple minutes left. I'm wondering how you could see those two being connected. I mean, do you think it would take someone like Pacquiao, who is obviously a national hero, a national treasure, moving that idea forward, or how else could it happen? Does it have to be from the ground up or grassroots? And so again, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but just give your sense as to how those two things might sort of pair up in the years to come.
Yeah, if we're going to respond at the multiple levels, like for example, we're going to use the CLA now. Of course, we need to have a news headline. A new news headline that will be, for example, the City of Sunshine, Philippines shining in 2040, perhaps, amidst disasters. And another one's a structure. We have a more resilient, responsive, integrating the ITs and including a people-oriented, cheap IT technologies facilitated by the government to respond to this. And I would like Pacquiao as a worldview. After being knocked out and getting up and winning his next fight, I think that is, a very nice worldview. And the myth would be the Bayanihan myth. It has to be sustained. Heroism has to be sustained. It has to become a way of life, like a practice and a habit, day-to-day reality, for each and every Filipinos, to have a better future in a post-Haiyan scenario.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Well, Sherman, obviously our thoughts are with the Philippines, and the reason we had even set this up was I'd emailed you obviously, after the typhoon, and just to make sure you were okay. And another colleague, Cesar Villanueva, some emails had gone to check in on him as well, and thankfully he was good. My wife has family in the Philippines, I have family in the Philippines, and obviously we were concerned. But thankfully everyone was spared. But unfortunately, as we started, not everyone was. So hopefully, again, with cultivating foresight, we can lessen the impact of these types of events. So, Sherman, thanks for joining us today. It was a pleasure to chat.
Thank you, John.
And we'll stay connected in the future. So thanks to Shermon O, Cruz, Director of the Center for Engaged Foresight. He's also a lecturer in International Relations, Humanities, and Social Sciences at the College of Arts and Sciences at Northwestern University in the Philippines. And today we are talking about learning from experience, resilience, and grassroots innovation in high disaster risk areas, specifically post-Haiyan futures in the Philippines. I'm John Sweeney in the Hawaii Research Center for Future Studies. This was Finding Our Futures. You're watching us on ThinkTech Hawaii. And tune in next week. We'll have more futures for you. Aloha.